Elena Vasquez had a system for surviving Tuesdays, and it went like this. Wake at 3:45 p.m. Eat standing at the counter, kiss her daughter goodnight before the child was even in bed, and leave for the hospital by 5:30 to start a 10-hour shift cleaning operating rooms before the morning surgeries began. She was 28. She had been doing this for 4 years. The apartment she shared with her daughter Sophia and her own mother Carmen had one bedroom, which the two older women split by unspoken agreement. Elena slept days, Carmen slept nights, and the bed was never cold for long. Sophia, 6 years old, slept on a fold-out in the living room, surrounded by a fortress of stuffed animals she'd collected from the hospital's donation bin. The ones with slightly crooked stitching that nobody wanted to buy. Elena told herself this was temporary. She had been telling herself that for 4 years. The work itself wasn't hard, exactly. It was repetitive, and it was invisible. Nobody thanked the person who made an operating room sterile again after a 12-hour trauma surgery. Elena had gotten good at being invisible. She moved through hallways like a draft of air, restocking, wiping, disinfecting, gone before the surgeons arrived to take credit for rooms she'd made possible. She had wanted once to be a nurse. She had even started community college for it 11 years ago before her father died, and the money for tuition became the money for rent. And then Sophia arrived 2 years after that, and the version of Elena who might have finished a degree quietly closed the door behind her and never came back. What stayed with Elena wasn't bitterness, not exactly. It was closer to a low hum of exhaustion that never fully switched off. The sense that she was spending her one life running in place. Her mother worried out loud, the way mothers do. "Mija," Carmen said one evening, watching Elena eat cereal for dinner at 4 p.m. because it was the only thing quick enough. "When do you rest? Not sleep. Rest." "I don't have time to tell the difference," Elena said, and meant it as a joke, and it came out sounding like something else. The call came on a Thursday in March, while Elena was on her lunch break in the stairwell, the only place quiet enough to hear. It was the school nurse. Sophia had fainted during recess. She was fine, dehydrated, low blood sugar, nothing dangerous. But they wanted a parent to come. Elena arrived still in her scrubs, smelling faintly of bleach, and found her daughter sitting on a cot looking impossibly small. "I didn't eat breakfast," Sophia admitted, not meeting her eyes. "Abuela was asleep and I didn't want to wake her." It wasn't a large moment as these things go. Nobody was seriously hurt. But Elena sat in her car afterward in the school parking lot and cried in a way she hadn't let herself cry in years. Not about the fainting, but about the 6-year-old who had learned already to go hungry quietly rather than disturb the adults holding the household together by threads. She is learning to disappear, Elena thought. The way I did. That night she didn't go to work. She called in, the first time in 4 years, and sat on the fire escape after Sophia and Carmen were asleep, looking at the orange smear of streetlight against the dark, and asked herself a question she'd been avoiding. If nothing changes, what does Sophia's life look like in 20 years? She already knew the answer. It looked like this one. Elena met Ruth Okafor 3 days later, entirely by accident, at a laundromat 2 blocks from the apartment. One of the few places open at 6 a.m. that wasn't the hospital. Ruth was maybe 60, silver-haired, dressed for a job that clearly didn't start at a warehouse or a hospital. She sat folding towels with the calm efficiency of someone who had done ordinary tasks for so long they'd become a kind of meditation. A paperback sat open on the table beside her, spine cracked, pages soft with rereading. You look like someone deciding something, Ruth said without looking up. Elena's startled laugh despite herself. Is it that obvious? You've read the same sentence of that intake form 4 times. Ruth nodded at the crumpled hospital paperwork in Elena's hand. Nothing important, just a form she'd been idly holding. People do that when their mind's somewhere else entirely. They talked. Ruth, it turned out, owned a small alteration shop 3 streets over. Had owned it for 11 years after spending the 2 decades before that as a single mother working nights at a textile plant. Not so different from Elena's own life now. How did you get from there to here? Elena asked, gesturing vaguely at the idea of Ruth's shop, her steadiness, the paperback she read for pleasure at 6 in the morning. Ruth considered the question seriously, the way people do when they've thought about the answer for years and never quite said it aloud. I stopped believing exhaustion was the same thing as effort, she said finally. I worked hard for a long time and stayed exactly where I was. It took me a while to understand those weren't the same thing. They kept meeting. First by coincidence, then on purpose, always at the laundromat, always around 6 before Elena's shift, and after whatever early routine Ruth kept. It was on their 4th meeting that Ruth said the thing that mattered. You told me you sleep from 6 to 2, Ruth said. What if you slept 6 to 1 and gave that hour to yourself instead of to your exhaustion? Elena bristled a little. 1 hour won't fix anything. No, Ruth agreed. 1 hour won't fix anything. 1,000 hours might, but you only ever get them 1 at a time. She explained what she meant. Not some rigid formula, but a habit she'd built for herself decades earlier, born of necessity rather than inspiration. Before her shop, before any of it, Ruth had carved out 1 hour most mornings. Not because a book told her to, but because it was the only hour her own mother wasn't awake to need something from her, and the only hour her own children weren't yet awake to need something from her either. It was the 1 hour that belonged to no one but Ruth. She'd used it in those early years to teach herself pattern making from library books, 1 stitch at a time, in a kitchen too small for the sewing machine she'd saved 4 months to buy. It wasn't about waking up early, Ruth said. Getting up early was never the point. The point was that I finally had 1 hour a day where I was allowed to build something instead of just surviving something. Most people don't get that hour handed to them. You have to take it. Elena thought of Sophia's cot in the living room, of the low hum of exhaustion, of the version of herself that had once wanted to be a nurse. What did you build with it? She asked. At first, almost nothing you'd notice. Some sketches, some ruined fabric, but eventually, this. Ruth gestured, meaning the shop, the paperback, the folded towels, the whole steady, unhurried life around her. Elena didn't transform overnight, and this part of the story matters. Because the version of this that inspires people the most is rarely the version that's true. She tried, the first week, to wake an hour earlier, at 1 p.m. instead of 2, and use the hour to relearn basic anatomy from an old textbook she still had from her aborted nursing classes. It went badly. She fell asleep on page 11, twice. She resented the alarm. She resented Ruth a little for making it sound simple. It's supposed to be hard at first, Ruth told her when Elena admitted this. That's not a sign you're doing it wrong. It's a sign your body has spent 4 years arranging itself around barely surviving, and it doesn't trust you yet when you say you want something more than that. So Elena adjusted rather than quit. She moved the hour to right after she woke, before she was fully conscious enough to talk herself out of it. She kept the textbook by her pillow. Some days she read for 10 minutes and fell back asleep. Some days she made it the full hour. She stopped punishing herself for the bad days on Ruth's advice and simply returned the next morning. By the third week, something had shifted. Not dramatically, but noticeably. She could name the parts of the circulatory system without looking. She'd started, almost without meaning to, watching free nursing prerequisite lectures on her phone during the hour, propped against pillows while Sophia still slept in the next room. By the 6th week, Carmen noticed. "You look different in the mornings," her mother said. "Less like someone bracing for something." "I am less like that," Elena admitted, surprised to realize it was true. The story would be dishonest if it left out the 8th week, when Elena almost stopped entirely. Sophia got sick. Nothing serious, a bad flu. And for 9 days, Elena's 1 hour disappeared into fevers and children's medicine, and the particular sleeplessness of a worried parent. When Sophia recovered, Elena found she'd lost the habit entirely. Waking earlier felt again like an assault rather than a choice. She skipped 4 mornings in a row and told herself she'd start again next week, which is the phrase people use when they mean never. It was Ruth who noticed at the laundromat that Elena hadn't mentioned her hour in 10 days. "I don't think this was ever really going to work," Elena admitted. "I think I wanted it to work more than I actually believed it would." Ruth didn't lecture her. She said only this: "The hour doesn't disappear because you missed it. It's still there tomorrow morning waiting, whether or not you show up for it. The only real failure is deciding it's gone for good." Elena went home and set her alarm again. Not out of confidence, but out of something smaller and more stubborn. She simply didn't want to explain to Sophia years from now why she'd stopped. Over the following 10 months, the hour Elena had carved out of her exhausted days became the scaffolding for something larger. She finished her prerequisite coursework through a free community program, studying in that same hour on the same secondhand phone, propped against the same pillows. She didn't quit her hospital job. She couldn't afford to, not yet. But she began in the last months of that year applying for a nursing program's evening cohort, one designed for people exactly like her. People who worked, who had children, who had run out of other doors to knock on. She was accepted in November. The morning she got the acceptance letter, she didn't call Ruth first. She woke Sophia gently, the way you wake a child you want to remember this moment, and told her the news before either of them had brushed their teeth. "Does this mean you'll be home for breakfast?" Sophia asked, which was, Elena realized, the only question that had ever really mattered to her daughter. "Not for a while yet," Elena said honestly. "But someday. And even before that, I'll be home for the hour after breakfast every single day. That one's already yours." Here is the lesson Elena would tell you herself if you asked her 3 years later, when she was a working nurse on the pediatric floor of the same hospital where she'd once cleaned operating rooms at dawn. It was never really about waking up early. Plenty of people wake up early and stay exactly where they started because they spend the hour on their phones or in a fog of resentment, treating the extra time as one more obligation rather than one more choice. The actual lesson, the one that took her the better part of a year to understand was this: exhaustion and effort are not the same thing, and it is possible to work extremely hard for years without ever moving forward if none of that work is aimed at anything beyond survival. The hour mattered only because Elena finally pointed it at something beyond getting through the day. Everything else, the timing, the discipline, the early alarm, was just the container. The direction was the substance, and the second lesson, the one she thinks about even more. She didn't do it alone, and she was not supposed to. Ruth's one act of noticing a tired woman folding paperwork at a laundromat, and choosing to sit with her rather than mind her own folding changed the entire shape of Elena's decade. Nobody transforms their life through willpower in a vacuum. Somebody has to hand you the hour, or at least prove to you that it's possible to take one. Elena tells this last part to every exhausted parent she meets now, usually at 2 a.m. in a hospital hallway, holding a clipboard, doing for someone else's frightened family what a stranger once did for hers. You don't need a miracle, she tells them. You need one honest hour pointed somewhere and one person willing to believe you can use it. Everything after that is just showing up, imperfectly for a very long time. Elena's story isn't really about waking up early. It's about pointing one honest hour at something that matters. So before you go, ask yourself, what's your 1 hour? And who's your Ruth? Tell me in the comments. And if this story moved you, subscribe, because every week we share one more tale worth carrying with you.